So anyone grow up making mud pies? Anyone grow up making mud pies? Oh, got one. You got one redneck. There we go. Okay, it's great. 2, 3, 4. I love a good mud pie. You know what I'm talking about? I think mud pies are great. You know what I'm talking about? So to make a legit mud pie though, I mean, first you gotta have like really good mud. But you gotta have one of them them silver pan things that you put, you know, what are they called? Pie pans. Yeah, there you go. You need a pie pan, but you need the silver ones, not like a legit one. Like kids, if you're listening, you're not supposed to like go get a pie pan like out of your like cupboard, nothing like that, unless your parents store and save pie pans from like, I don't know, you might do that. Either way, it's fine. No judgment here. Either way, the silver pie pans, you know, like the little aluminum ones, that's what you got to have to make a legit mud pie. And you can go get one of those and fill it up, and it's fantastic. It's legit. I don't know if y'all were people that grew up serving mud pies as like gifts for Father's Day. It makes a great Father's Day gift, you know, for you to present your dad with it. Even better on Mother's Day. On Father's Day, you want to give the mud pie gift outside the house, but for Mother's Day, you want to take it inside the house. That's where you want to present the gift for Mom on Mother's Day, because the truth is, Mom's going to say, I ain't cleaning up this mess, and then Dad's going to have to clean it up. You know what I'm talking about? And so that's the plan. That's the rule there. Mud pies or just playing in the mud in general, I think, are something that every kid needs to figure out, needs to be a part of. You know, it ought to just be a thing. We played in the mud a ton as kids. There's one time I can't remember whose field it was in. We were in some field. There was 4 of us. And we were, 11, 7, 6, and 5, or 6 and 6. Either way, like those ages, there's 4 of us. And so we're walking through, I can't remember whose field we're in. There's cows in this field, though. And so I'm sure the talk was, hey, we're about to go cow tipping. That's what we were thinking we were going to do as 11, 9, and 2 6-year-olds. Like, we were just going to hit this cow broadside, and we were like, hey, we're about to put this cow on its back. You know what I'm saying? Because we are grown men, and that's what we do. That's what grown men do. They tip cows. And so that's what we're doing. We were walking through, and the youngest one, he's walking through, and of course, we have been playing. There's mud all over. It's like we're just dirty. That's just where we were. And so with mud everywhere, and he looks down, and he says, look, someone was in this field playing with mud pies too, and picks up this fantastic cow patty. So for those of you who thought that you could never have a hot mud pie, you're wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like it's warm. It's like a $5 hot and ready. Let's go. Just find you a cow pasture, right? I tell you, playing in mud, if you're a mud player, if you're a mud pit person, you're actually in pretty good company. There's a moment in the life of Jesus where he plays in the mud. And there's a moment in the life of Jesus where he plays in mud, and we learn so much from it. Jesus is stirring up some trouble. If you weren't here last week, let me catch you up just briefly. There's this festival happening for Jewish folks in the city of Jerusalem, and it's one of 3 pilgrimage festivals, which means that everyone has to come to Jerusalem. No matter where you live, you have to come to Jerusalem 3 times a year, and this is one of those. It's the last one of the year. It's the big party, the big huge celebration. It's referred to as the holiday. In Hebrew, or in English, we refer to it as the Feast of the Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. If you speak Hebrew, you just call the festival Sukkot, which is why we don't talk about Hebrew in church, right? That's just it. So we're just going to call it Feast of Tabernacles, which are these temporary little tiny dwellings that are created by the Jewish people when they would come back for this particular, get together. And so they would come back and they would make these huts and these booths all over the city. They would live in the huts for like 8 days, and they would hang out. That's what they did for 8 days. It was this huge celebration. There was campfires everywhere. Anyway, this is a big, huge thing. Jesus is in the middle of that, or actually towards the tail end of that. It's coming to a conclusion. He's starting to say some things to the religious people that are making them very uncomfortable. And he does not like how it's going, or they do not like how he's going. And so they get so frustrated and so angry with him that they decide, that's it, he's done, we're going to kill him. And so they begin to pick up stones, and their plan is, we're going to throw stones, and we're going to knock him on the ground with them, and then we're going to gather in a circle around him, and we're going to take stone after stone, and we're going to hit him with it until he bleeds out. He's about to die. And in this moment, Jesus decides, now's a really good time to leave. And so Jesus decides, all right, I'm out of here. And so he starts leaving. Well, his followers are going with him. And that's where we pick up this little moment here. It wasn't a planned outline. There wasn't a planned message when Jesus woke up this morning. It's because he was about to die. He was about to be stoned in a circle and not live anymore because of the amount of rocks that were going to hit his head and the blood that would be released from his temple. And he decides, let's get out of here. And as he walks, they come across this guy, and his followers are with him, and they ask a question. They said, hey, Jesus, there's a guy sitting here. He's blind. The whole community knows him. He's been blind since birth. Been sitting here on the side of the road every day begging. And they ask him, Jesus, who sinned? His parents or him? You see, for the Jewish folks, they believe that one of two things must be true. Either the reason the guy's born blind and has been blind his whole life is because his parents did something so awful that they are now being punished, and their punishment is their child can't see. Or they believe that God foreknew and saw in advance that this guy was going to do something so egregious that God just allowed him to be born blind to keep him from doing that awful thing. And so one of those two things must be true. And so he asked him, so which is it, Jesus? Is it his parents' fault or is it his fault? Now that's an interesting question. Jesus has to answer. Jesus wants to give an answer. Jesus gives an answer, and it's not either of the choices that they give him to answer. We find it in the book of John. John is one of Jesus' closest friends. To tell you how close of a friend John is, John hangs out with Jesus for a few years and becomes so close that as Jesus is down on the cross, he looks down and sees John next to his mother and says, John, your mother. In other words, Jesus' mother. And he's like, hey, in other words, will you take care of my mother like she would be your own because I'm about to die? Right? That's how close friends they were. And so John experienced a lot of these moments and a lot of these things with him. And so John is there to record, and that's where we get John's book at. And in John chapter 9, he records Jesus' response to the question, is it the parent's sin or his sin? With Jesus' answer, this is what Jesus says in verse 3. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Now, when Jesus says it wasn't his sin or his parents' sin, he's not saying that his parents have never sinned, nor was he saying that this guy had never sinned. He was just saying that the reason that he's blind and has been blind since birth is not because of anyone's sin, not his parents' mistakes and not his mistakes that were going to happen that God prevented. Both of those things, theologically, God has said that is not what's happening here. That is not what has taken place. That's not the reason. But the reason he gives is this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Now, what's really interesting about this is that for you to be born blind, you are an enormous burden on your family in the first century. Now, today, we have people that are born blind or become blind, and they have incredible lives, satisfying, and they achieve the things they want to achieve, and medicine, and so many things have advanced. But in the first century, it just wasn't like that. You were born blind. You were an enormous burden. You could do nothing. There was no occupation for you. There was nothing there. The only thing you could do was sit on the side of the street and hold a cup up and beg. That's it. And so the entire town knew this man. Everybody had seen him for years, for decades. Hold up his cup, hoping, not even seeing the people pass by, but just hearing their footsteps, hoping that someone would drop something in the cup or in the bucket for him. You see, the world told the man his life was pointless. Jesus, on the other hand, saw purpose. Where the world looked at this man's life and said, there's no point. You will simply be a burden. Jesus saw purpose. So Jesus bends down and he spits into the dirt. And he rubs it around and he makes mud. And he takes the mud and he puts it all over the man's eyes. And he looks at him and says, go and wash and you'll see. So the man gets up and he begins to take a familiar walk to a place called the Pool of Siloam, which is a pool just south of the temple. It's a pool that most or everyone in the city was aware of and knew about. And this isn't like a pool like floaties and drinks and barbecues and that kind of thing, like suntan lotion. That's not what's happening at this pool. It's not that kind of pool, you know what I'm saying? It's this thing of water. We talked about a little bit about it last week. And so he would go there, and he had been there previously, and so he makes his way down, and I don't know if he cups the water in his hands or he sticks his face all the way into the pool. We don't have that detail. But what we do know is that he begins to clean his eyes from the mud that was on them. And as he cleans off the mud, the man begins to see. And the people around him are like, what? What? Now, if I was one of the people around them, this just tells how just awful of a person I am. The first thing I would have thought about is, where'd you get that mud and can I have some? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is cool that you can see, but I'm about to get rich, okay? So where'd the mud come from? You know what I'm saying? Like, what honey hole did you get that one from? You know what I'm saying? And can I bottle it and sell it in stores? You know, but that's what they're thinking. Like, man, what in the world just happened? And so his neighbors, John tells us, they come to him like, hey, what's going on? Like, what happened? How did this happen? And he responds to him and he says, there's this man, this man put mud in my eyes and told me to go wash it out, and I could see, and I did. And I can. And so word travels super fast because this is ridiculous. Like, this is unreal. People have seen this guy for decades sitting on the street and begging, so everybody knows him. And so word travels super fast to the priests and to the Sadducees and the Pharisees and all the people in the temple, and they hear about it, like, what? He can see? Like, are we talking about the same guy? Like, yeah, dude, the same guy. Like, the guy sits there cup like this. Like, yeah, that guy, he can see. And so they're like, let's go talk to him. We want to talk to him, so bring him in. So they bring him in. And so they bring him in, and they're looking at him. They're like, hey, we hear that you've been healed. And you would think, like, okay, I know what they're going to say next. That's incredible. Praise God. You know what they say? They say, were you healed on the Sabbath by chance? And he's like, yeah. Like, well, you can't heal on the Sabbath. What? You know? Like, well, who did it? Who would do such a thing? And then, so the first time he talks about it, he says, this man. The second time he's asked, now by the religious leaders, he says, I don't know, he must have been a prophet. In other words, he's saying he must have had some authority, because obviously, you're right, you can't work on the Sabbath. Like, we're all Jews here, we get it, right? But he must have been a prophet, right? He must have been a prophet. His prophet must have, that's it, that's what happened. So the religious leader's like, no, I don't like this. This Jesus character, we almost had him dead, and now he's walking around healing people. Now people are getting excited. It's going to be much harder to kill a man everybody's excited about, okay? And so they got to figure out a way to discredit him. So they bring in the guy's parents. Like, hey, bring his parents in here. We're going to talk to his parents. And so they ask his parents, like, hey, did your son get healed by a guy named Jesus, you know? And their response is, that's our son. He's been healed. But as far as who, he's of age, ask him. Now, what's interesting is that John gives us some insight that there's some fear with the parents. They're nervous to tell them that Jesus did it. And so they say, hey, my son's of age, ask him. Because they know that Jesus, there's some tension here with these religious leaders and Jesus. And they also know if they say the wrong thing, the religious leaders might just kick them out of Judaism altogether, kick them out of the temple. So in our current version, right, we would say, hey, you can be excommunicated from a church, right? Now, in the first century, this is a much bigger deal than it is now. Like, so for instance, let's just say that one of you did something so crazy that I was like, you know what? You are out of here at Foundation. You don't belong here. I know we say it, but not you, kiddo, right? Let's just say that happened, right? Let's just say it happened. If that happened, you know what you would do? You'd be like, all right, deuces. I'm going to go to one of the other churches. There's 111 in Coweta County. You've got plenty to choose from, right? So you just go find another one. If you're in the first century and you're a Jew, if you get kicked out, there's nowhere else to go. It's just one temple. And the thing is, life, it's not just religious life revolves around the temple. All social life, everything revolves around your connection to the temple and to Judaism. And so if you get kicked out, if you get disowned, your life is done. You got to move. You got to restart everything. It's over for you. And so they look at his son and say, ask him, he's of age. And the truth is, the son he's never been in anyway. Being born blind, he hasn't been allowed to participate in any kind of religious life. He's been an outcast the whole time. He doesn't even know what he's missing. So it's like, ask him. And so they do. They decide, you know what, we're going to give you one last chance. One last chance. One last chance. And so they form it in a religious question. They say, hey, come on in. Now give glory to God. Tell us what happened. You know, like, hey, just letting you know, we represent God here. Obviously, we got an answer we want you to say. Give glory to God. Tell us what happened. This is his response. He says in chapter 9, verse 27, he answered, I've told you already and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Oh, I like this guy. I like this guy. It's like, come on, fellas. You've asked my neighbors. You've asked me. You've asked my parents. You're asking me again. Why are you so interested? Like, what is going on here? You know, it doesn't end well for the guy in terms of his relationship because they kick him out. And Jesus hears that he gets kicked out. Jesus goes to find him. Now remember, up until this point, this man still has not seen Jesus. Last time Jesus was with him, he had mud on his eyes, and he was still blind. So Jesus goes to find him. It's not like Jesus can look across the crowd and make eye contact. I'm like, hey, right? Jesus got to go right up to him. As Jesus begins to talk to him, I'm sure that voice, like, hey, I recognize this voice. I know this voice. I know this voice. This is a good voice. This is a voice of freedom. This is a voice of healing. This is the voice of Jesus. And Jesus begins to talk, and he says this, for judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this and asked, what? Are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So Jesus says, hey, I've come into the world because there's some judgment that's going to happen. And I'm here to be a part of that. And I'm here to help the blind to see. But, and of course, he gets interrupted by the Pharisees. He's like, whoa, 1 second, 1 second. Like, I get all these other people can't see because they're blind. But you're not talking about us, right? Like, you're not talking, like, are you saying that we are blind? And Jesus responds with, well, if you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty of sin. Which is very interesting that that's how this whole conversation got started with the blind man, right? Who was guilty of sin. He said, but if you're blind, you wouldn't be guilty. But because you claim to see, you are guilty. It'd be like a true blind man who can't see anything, walking around, running into walls, tripping over things, and insisting he can see fine. Yet everyone else knows. Everybody can see it. Like, well, there's 2 and 2 are not going together here. He's like, no, I don't want any help. I don't need any help because I can see. I can see everything fine. That's what Jesus is saying is happening. And Jesus is beginning to use this man's physical blindness to point out the spiritual blindness that exists in the entire community. And he said, hey, please don't think that you can see just because you say, I can see. In other words, there will be accountability for what we think we know especially when it contradicts what is actually true. There will be accountability for what we think we know, especially when it contradicts what is actually true. We can create a truth that matters to us and our friends, but it does not actually change the truth. There's an old fable out of India. It's told about 3 blind men. And they're in a village, and they've been blind since birth. And so they hear about a new animal that they get to experience as being brought to the village. It's called an elephant. And so they're so excited, like, man, yeah, can't wait to experience this elephant. And like, yeah, we're going to give y'all a chance to go in and hang out with, like, experience the elephant, you know? And so they go in, they hang out with the elephant, right? And they come back out, and so people are asking, like, what was it like? What was the elephant like? Like, tell us about it. Tell us about it. From your perspective, what was the elephant like? And so the first guy was like, oh, man. Honestly, like, it's like the way people talked about it was smaller than I thought. Like, oh, smaller? I was like, yeah. It's like, it reminded me of a mouse with a long tail. Like a mouse with a long tail. He's like, yeah, it was furry. It was really soft. It was so small. Like, I just held it in my hand, and the tail just went on forever. Like, I couldn't reach the end of it. Like, it was just this tail. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? And the other guy was like, no, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Dude, when I was in there with the elephant, I touched it. I felt it. Like, I was touching it, and I couldn't even wrap my arms around it. It was so big. And then its skin was like so rough and like thick, you know, and I was like pressed up against it. And I was like, I couldn't get my arm around it. Like, it was just huge. Like, what are you and the other guy was like, guys, what elephant were you talking? Like, what elephant were y'all in the room with? I held it in both of my hands at the same time. Like, I picked the whole thing up in my hands. It reminded me more like a snake than anything. Like, it was long, and it kind of went back and forth, and, you know. And of course, they're arguing and fighting with each other, and they're like, no, dude, you're lying. And the guy's like, no, you're lying. I was like, no, you're lying. And so they start beating each other up. They're at blows. The problem was, one guy had a hold of the tail. The other guy had a hold of the leg. And the last guy had a hold of the trunk. Yet none of them saw the whole elephant. In other words, truth and perspective are not always the same thing, even if it feels like they are. Truth and perspective are not always the same thing, even if it feels like they are. It's hard to know the real truth, though, isn't it? Well, the truth is Jesus is. So let's start there and walk our way forward. Because it's this moment that sets up this statement about who Jesus is that really gives us an incredible amount of clarity about Jesus' expectations for how we interact with him. Jesus wants to explain this thought to them. And so he begins by talking about something very familiar for everyone. Something that whether you were a Jewish person or not a Jewish person, you would know what he was talking about. As someone that if you were inside of the community or outside of the community, you would understand what he's talking about. And he begins to talk about sheep. He says this in chapter 10, verse 1. He says, very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. He's a thief and a robber. In other words, he's saying, hey, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Everybody understands that sheep hang out in a pen, right? At night, they got to go somewhere. They go into the pen. That's where it's at. Anybody who belongs in and out of there will use the door to get in and out. But there are some people who do not want to use the door because they don't have access. It doesn't make sense for them walking the front door, so they hop over the sides of the gate. They want to get into something, and so Jesus has a name for them, thieves and robbers. In other words, they're trying to take something that does not belong to them. They're trying to have access to something that they should not have access to. They're trying to get into a place and use a method to get in that they're not supposed to use. And Jesus is pointing towards the Pharisees, these religious leaders that think they have a monopoly and think they have the entire picture of God and the story of God in terms of sin and salvation, in terms of what a Messiah looks like and doesn't look like, in terms of how God is going to redeem the world or not redeem the world. Jesus is the missing link that they are clearly missing, and they think they have a great idea of the entire picture of God. But they don't realize that the key piece is Jesus standing in front of them. So Jesus begins to talk in words that they understand and says, this is the deal. Y'all are the sheep. Y'all are the robbers and the thieves. You're trying to get into a place but not use the proper way. So Jesus makes it plain to them in verse 7. Therefore Jesus said, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. And so people are like, how do you know how we're getting in and out? How do you know if we're thieves or robbers? And Jesus just tells them, because I'm the gate. And I know I ain't seen you coming here through me, which means you got to be getting in there some other way, which makes you a thief or a robber. Someone trying to take something that does not belong to them. Now, this is big. This is huge. In the context of this conversation, in what is right and what is wrong, what is righteous and not righteous, in terms of truth, in terms of salvation, in terms of all those things, Jesus is saying, I'm the gate. You got to go through me. Anybody else who wants to get into the sheep pen any other way other than through the gate is a liar. Now, this is difficult for them to hear, and so Jesus does what any person who's trying to make a good point will do. He doubles down on it. He says again, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, and I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. He says, I'm the gate. I'm the gate. There are other people coming for the sheep, but their purpose is different. They think they're bringing a life to the full, but the truth is they are just simply trying to take something that they do not have possession of, that does not belong to them. And Jesus says, when you use me, when you use the gate, you go in and out and you find pasture and you find purpose in life. So the question becomes that we have to ask ourselves is, what is Jesus the gate to? What is he the gate to? When we read the entire story of God, we find a number of things that Jesus is the gate to. The first one is he's the gate to God's presence. If you want the presence of God, it's through Jesus. Not only God's presence, but Jesus is also the gate to God's acceptance. Being accepted into the family of God, the gate is through Jesus. To be even more specific, our salvation, Jesus is the gate for that. That if anyone wants to enter into salvation, you have to use the gate of Jesus. Heaven. Jesus is the gate for heaven. The kingdom of God. Jesus is the gate to the kingdom of God. Eternal life. Jesus is the gate. Now, when we realize that Jesus is the gate, it requires us to make an admission. When we recognize Jesus is the gate, it requires us to make an admission. Now, there's this old, really creepy song, and it's super creepy. And it's creepy, not because necessarily the lyrics. It's creepy because the children that filmed the song in the music video. and it was taught in churches. And so if you want to go Google one gate, two, I think it's one gate, two, whatever, I don't know. It's like one gate, two gate or something. You could probably just put really creepy church song by kids in the 80s, and this will pop up. So it was an old school thing, like probably 80s or so. And when you look at that, you're like, I'm having nightmares about these children tonight. Like they just, I don't know. You got to see it. We should have just shown the video, but it is what it is. I'm not going to show it because then you'll have nightmares, and I don't want that. But there's this song that we used to teach kids in church. I say I'm actually not guilty of this time, okay? But churches used to teach it. So maybe some of you have heard this song, and maybe we have a child star among us. Maybe you were in the video and I've offended you. It could be. This is one of the lyrics. One door and only one, and yet its sides are two, inside and outside. On which side are you? One door and only one, and yet its sides are two, inside and outside. On which side are you? When we come to the realization that Jesus is the gate, it requires us to make an admission. The admission is, am I inside or outside the gate? That's the admission that everyone has to make. And right now in your head, you can make that admission. Like, okay, am I inside the gate or am I outside the gate? And I'll give you a hint, right? If you're like, I don't know if I'm inside, that means you're outside. There's no doubt, right? There is assurance in a relationship with Jesus. And so if you're sitting there like, man, okay, so I need to make an admission. I need to at least acknowledge here, inside or outside. Which one am I? Now, the next step with that is say, okay, if I'm outside, if I've admitted to myself that I'm outside the gate of Jesus, what should I do? There's a lot of options. The first option could be nothing. We're going to wrap up here in just a few minutes, and you can just go to lunch. That's a doable thing. However, I believe that every single person on the planet should be given the greatest opportunity to explore the possibility that Jesus is more significant than they thought he was. To make a well-informed decision about who Jesus really is. And so we try to make that as easy as possible to begin that conversation. So we're going to throw a number up on the screen. And simply, you just text the simple word begin to the number on the screen. And our pastoral staff is ready to begin an anonymous texting conversation with you. You don't have to tell us your name. You never have to tell us your name. You just might have questions. You simply might have spiritual questions that you would like to ask. And that's a good place for you to start that. Now, if you would choose, so if you're like, you know what, I would like for that texting conversation to graduate to an in-person conversation or a phone call, that's on you. And when you're ready for that to graduate to the next level, to do something in person or to have coffee or have lunch or just come sit in the office and talk, you're welcome to do that too. Or if you just want to schedule a phone call, you can do that to continue to explore who is Jesus really? And do I want to be on the inside of whatever gate he's got? Those are all really valid questions. And we encourage you to explore them. Now, I would also encourage you that maybe if right now you're like, I don't know if I want to do that. If you're thinking, if you at least made an admission inside that says, man, I'm outside the gate, would you at least take a picture of the screen so that maybe at some point this week you decide, you know what, I want to do something. I do want to do something. I want to ask some questions. That you'll have the number. At any point, you don't have to start spiritual conversations on Sunday. It can be any day. Any day is a great day. There's no doubt the more we come to find and learn about Jesus, the more it encourages us to make better decisions about our future and about who we are. If you're a follower of Jesus in the room and you've made an admission inside where he says, you know what, I'm on the inside of the gate. It is our hope and our heart that you are available to those in your life that would make an admission of, I'm outside the gate. Because maybe even texting in is a little too intimidating, but them having a conversation with you would be right up their alley. So would you make sure that you are available? That you lean in and you're there to have the conversation? Because don't forget, when someone wants to have their first conversation about Jesus, it could be one of the most important conversations in their world, even though it wasn't on your schedule. You got places to be and things to do. But this one conversation might be enormously important. Take a breath and slow down. Be available for it. I trust the words of Jesus. And he says, I'm the sheep gate.